Oh god, hello again. This is like the fourth time I've tried this today. So hopefully this time it will work. It's not gone well. It's not gone well. So MSI, you can see my tier list. Format is what I'm going to talk about before I get into the tier list. There's no BO1s anymore. So that's going to be a lot more exciting. It's a lot more competitive. There's still going to be some interesting games in plans, but I'm not really hyped for it. I'm not going to lie. I really think there's only two very, very good teams at this tournament that have a chance of winning unless the level drops. I mean, the level could rise. Don't get me wrong, the level could rise and other teams could outperform the BLG and Gen G, but I'm not that hopeful. I can't lie to you guys. But anyway, any comments that I make, it's more down to current strength than it is anything to do with matchups or anything like that. So the fact that I have BLG rated above Gen G just means I think they're currently stronger, not that I think that when the two teams play that BLG will beat Gen G. I will do prediction videos, I might not, when teams play each other, but this isn't a prediction video. This is just this is where teams' strengths roughly are in my opinion. So BLG. I think BLG are the best team in the world right now, because they are so good at playing around the bot lane. It does seem to be a bot lane meta. They probably have the best Lucian Nami lane in the world and one of the just best solid bot lanes in the world. They're very consistent, which to me appears to be a result mostly of their knowledge of matchups, and they seem to just have less in moments than all of the top bot lanes. This is partially because Jun is always in the bot lane before the opposing jungler, so trying to shut down those sort of rotations could be very important when trying to beat BLG. This is also especially important when you consider the top teams at this tournament, not just in general the top teams at this tournament. Gen G's weakness is the bot lane. T1's bot lane is inconsistent. It is just a better bot lane than TES. And at the moment, that just sort of hurts me as a Jackie fan. But, we'll see what happens. And whilst Rek'Sai should sort of be dead by the MSI patch, we'll still see a lot of weak side tops with the likes of Udyr and Sak. But obviously, if you need to play through top rather than having a weak top side, then Bin is still one of the best in the world. Additionally, Bin has been showing less of an ego and moving on to some of the more supportive picks rather than the ego picks he was known for. And Knight has been class as well. Obviously, Bin is not in his best year at the moment, but I don't think that really matters when you look at the way the team's been playing, unless you do have to play through topside, and then it is a question mark. But we'll see what happens. In terms of weakness, they do overcommit, every LPL team pretty much does, and Knight doesn't really play the Azir to the same level of any of the top mids at the tournament, nor does he really play any of the counters very well. So expect that to be the way to exploit BLG, especially in the draft, because if you were forced to commit a ban to the Azir, whereas every other team doesn't really have to do that, then that's going to be an issue for you. But we'll see what happens. I do think BLG still are one of the best teams. Gen G, my second team. I am going to talk about Gen G's weaknesses first, which may come across as a bit harsh, but just hear me out. I do think they are a good team. Obviously, that's why they're in the S+ tier. But Gen G's weakness is their bot lane. It's not very stable relative to the other lanes. And their Lucian Nami lane looks nowhere near as effective as a team like BLG's. Paze, though, is having a bit of a slump. This is more form than anything. And I think he can definitely come out of it, especially when you consider, the 5-man team is one of the most stable and consistent in the world. And when you combine that with some of the best map rotations and the best macro, then I think, they definitely have the ability to beat some of the top teams, even when underperforming. Additionally, Chovy just seems to constantly scale. He's constantly picking up minor advantages in gold and CS, picking up the pressure. But he's got even better at going in and playmaking. He might just be the best player in the world right now, which coming into MSI with one of the most stable teams as well is just an incredible potential for a roster. Obviously he has the reputation of being a bit of an international choker, but he's not really the Bjergsen who could play only in NA. I still expect him to do something, even if he does continue to choke, and it feels more of a narrative than the truth, to be honest. So I do expect to see something from him, especially if the team continues to have just this much better of an understanding of win cons than any other team as they do. I will link the video, hopefully, of I Will Dominate explaining how they do this with Aurelion Sol, because it's just a good explanation. So I do think even if Chovy chokes, if Paze steps up, or even if Paze slumps and Chovy chokes a little bit, I still think that'll be a good side. Expect to see a lot of people, me included, hating on the Corkis that get picked up by weaker teams because of how good Chovy makes Corki look. He's the only player at MSI that I want to see on the Corki, to be honest. Stylistically, the matchup between BLG and Gen G will be quite interesting because it's a clash of the team that's the best in the world at gaining early advantages and the team that's the best at negating those early advantages by macro decisions late game. So that will be a very interesting game. Moving on to the third team, T1. Obviously, I need to remind you that I'm a paid hater of T1 and I'm an LPL shill, so take whatever I say about T1 with a pinch of salt, I guess. T1 are a very interesting team at the moment. They play for a strong top side and strong bot side, which is just like completely unlike any other team in the world. It doesn't really make sense because it means that your two like strong sides are like opposite sides of the maps, which makes it very hard for the jungler to like support both of them. But it works because the reason why they do this is they want to play aggressively in bot with the jungler hovering, which allows them to get advantage in the bot lane, and it sort of dares you to gank Zeus, who is like one of the best at like surviving ganks, or if he doesn't survive ganks, like he'll get good death timers, and because he understands how to manipulate the lane to make it a good death timer. And so basically, if you don't completely kill him in lane, then in theory he can just easily take over because he's so good at taking the best death timings, so that the lane is just like not that bad. He doesn't lose that many things by dying, and then he can basically just build off one big win in the game that like completely will allow him to take over the game. Additionally, the shot calling from Faker just seems to be one of the best in the world still, despite some macro issues. Like, when you consider the way they play around Baron relative to any other team, like, they are so good at calling when to take a Baron, when they're behind, when they're ahead. Their double smite strategies are way more effective than anyone else's in the league. They could take over, just in general, in this tournament, if all the players come into form. Like, Zeus looks in bad form, and he's sort of playing like the Shy in bad form with all his isolated deaths, but he's still has the potential to pop off. He's still got that carry potential. Carrier standard champion pool looks a lot weaker than it used to. Like, in the past, you could rely on his like standard picks and the pocket picks, but right now his Rakan and Nautilus look poor, so I expect him to pick up some of the more off-meta picks. And to be honest, that sort of sums up their bot lane's issues. Like, you still can't give them the Varus Ashe, and you should look to avoid giving them Senna. But like, if you force them onto something more standard, standard and aggressive, then they do look a bit poor, which is bad for the meta. But like, T1, man, like, they definitely have the highest ceiling and the lowest floor. Like, they are so worth keeping an eye on because they could finish first. They could finish 6th. I don't expect them to finish as low as 6th, but you know what I mean? Like, they could finish 6th. I don't think they will. I mean, actually, I just looked over at my tier list rather than, like, at my vague notes. And no, they can't finish 6th. They could finish 5th, though. But, you know. Oh, God. Right. TES. Top are probably the weakest of the top 4 teams. I mean, 369 is still the top lane go. He has a very standard pool and is one of the best weak side players in the world, but some of the picks that aren't so much in his wheelhouse are just not going to be very good. Jackie and Mako are still one of the best laning 2v2s in the world, but like, they got dismantled by BLG, so like, or not dismantled, they got beaten by BLG. They were worse than BLG. Can you really rely on them against the top teams? Their main weakness really is that Tian is like a weak player mechanically and like in terms of macro at times. Like, almost whenever anything like unexpected happens, he just seems to freeze mechanically and mentally, which means he loses a lot of 50-50 smites. Like, he cannot be relied on in those clutch situations, and he definitely feels like part of the reason why the team appears to be so lacking, like in meta knowledge relative to the other teams, or macro knowledge, not meta knowledge relative to the other teams. But like, I don't know. He's not bad, but he's not good enough, in my opinion, right now, to be in a team that's looking to win MSI. Kareem has been forced more onto control mages than is like more his picks, but like, he still looks solid. He doesn't look like a weak player, but this is his first international experience. There's a lot of hype around him from players that people haven't really watched him in LPL. It's like, we'll see what happens. I don't know. I don't have a lot of expectations for top. However, though, saying that, top were definitely looking better in the playoffs than they were in the regular season, and comparing with them with Genji and T1 is definitely difficult when it comes to a stylistic matchup, just because of how much top do lack in that macro. I fully expect this team to continue to ramp up, and even if right now, like, they're quite clearly 4th in the world in this tournament without any real contention for being in top 3, like, expect when it comes to, if they qualify for Worlds, which I think they should. I mean, LPL is always quite hard to predict just because of the sheer number of good teams. Like, they should be looking to finish like top 3, top 2 at Worlds, or looking to compete for that anyway. So, you know, they could be very good. But keep an eye on them. Don't expect them to show up quite in the same way as the other top 3 teams. Even as an LPL fan, that's what I'm saying. So, we'll see. G2, right? The best of the rest, and I believe the best in Europe. It really felt like they weren't taking the split all that seriously. I mean, a lot of their games this year did just look like scrims. I mean, that final in particular was very, like, noteworthy for that. G2 are definitely the most innovative team in the West, and they've experimented with lane swaps on stage when it was completely unnecessary. Again, that final. But they are prone to a lot of silly errors, and these silly errors will just get punished easily by other top 4 teams in a way that just, like, will completely take them out of the game, especially when you consider that G2 often overfight when they're behind, which, like, is easy to punish, especially for these top teams. So, like, there's hope, but there's also not. I mean, there's also another beacon of hope in that Caps is looking incredible and he's in top form. And that, if the team is playing some of their more interesting picks, like the Cogmorn that they've been showing in scrims again, then they might be able to upset some of the stronger teams. But, they could also just lose against the weaker teams if they show their domestic performances. As Kitty said, G2 literally shit themselves 50% of the time. So, we'll see. I have faith, but I also don't. Team Liquid. Alright. This team, on paper, is basically no different from last year. It's slightly weaker, actually. But give credit to Spawn, man. That's basically the only real difference between them and this season and last season. And, the big difference is that last season, right, they were never really very good. People will cite their close game against T1 at Worlds. But let's be real, TL were never going to win that game. Last year, all TL could do was get an early advantage, then lose in peace, just, learning absolutely nothing over the course of the whole year. Whereas this year, they actually showed the biggest growth of any team in any of the playoffs that I watched. And they are just so much more disciplined than any of the other Western teams at this tournament. Right now, the meta kind of is falling in place for them. It favors APA, especially given he is growing on that Azir. Their bot lane has looked more solid in playoffs, but part of that could be the recency bias of seeing them play against Fly's rookie bot lane. They do have Impact, who I do fully expect to sort of show up alongside the experience of Core JJ. I think, with TL, we can expect them to do something, even if not a lot, really. I think they'll beat a lot of the teams. I think they'll beat all the teams that are worse than them and just lose to all the teams better than them. But who is actually better than them and who is actually worse than them is going to be difficult to know, because they do seem to learn faster than any of the other teams. They do seem to scout better than any of the other teams. Fnatic. I think a lot of Western teams are overrating them. Jun looked okay in playoffs, but he doesn't really justify that import slot. Noah is often overly passive, and he also doesn't justify that import slot. Humanoid has looked like a criminal grief for a lot of this year. The team's been constantly disconnected and constantly losing games in seconds, pretty much just in one fight. I mean, if there is one saving grace, though, it's definitely Razok. He's slowly making a case for himself being one of the Western GOATs. And Oscar continues to grow in lane as well. So, they have potential, but they are firmly stuck in the Western part of that tier list as far as, their current shape is. But, they could grow. They could definitely improve. If they can get rid of that disconnect, then, we can see something out of them. They could probably grow into that TL, maybe even that G2 tier list, but they need to sort out that disconnect. FlyQuest, I think this tournament is just going to be a learning experience for them. Right now, as things stand, they just don't have the firepower to compete with the top teams, or really even the top Western teams, maybe even with Fnatic. The reason for this is sort of what Inspired was referring to with Jensen's vegan gameplay, alongside an inexperienced and currently weak bot lane. This isn't really an indictment against Jensen's gameplay, but he's not really the type of player to go ahead and make the game-winning play, especially not in a proactive way. It's normally more reactive on a control mage. And with Masu and Busio facing the prospect of just getting smashed in lane game after game after game, this is going to be an issue that they don't have that proactive mid laner. And even if you do hold Inspired and Bwipo as being one of the top jungles in this tournament, which I'm not really sure I do, they still aren't good enough to win the game as a two-man against any of those teams. Against any of the teams above them. So I'm not really sure about how Fly can go about winning games against top opposition or even opposition above them. However, I am interested to see what this team can bring for this tournament, as well as future events. I think the future potential of this team is going to be very, very interesting. Loud. I think Loud could be very interesting. I don't think they have the power. They don't have the firepower to even beat a Fnatic. They probably won't be able to execute their plays in the same way as they could in Brazil. They're sort of the old Bam Bjergsen teams in the sense that they dominate their region by just simply being better and getting advantages in lots of different ways. But it's not going to be enough on the international stage. Their support can only play engaged champs, which hurts in this meta. The ADC is solid, but is he really good enough to compete with even your Noahs, your Masus? Tinones feels like a bit of an old man these days, but he's still fairly solid. Robo is good, but his play style of sitting back on the Jax probably will not be working against these top teams. They have some pieces, but I don't think they're going to do anything with them. PSG, as you can see by the fact that they're in the I don't really know category, I haven't not watched a lot of it, and apologies to my LGL fans, as this did used to be my third choice region behind the LEC and LPL, and I had that relationship with V3 Esports, which you guys might be aware of, but I didn't really watch much of them this season. The macro still looked outdated as a whole. The PSG also looked poor in the regular split and had to step it up in playoffs, but also if you watched any of the playoffs, you'll know the fact that Hawks made it to the finals, and Hawks are just abysmal, as well as all the Japanese teams were this year. So like it just fills me with a lot of doubt. But you know, shit can happen, and like PSG did clap Hawks in that final. So like maybe there's something there. They've got a lot of experience as well, so maybe. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Estral. I did not watch a lot of LLA this year. Similar reason for why I didn't watch PCS or LJL. I've just been a bit busy, and like you couldn't really get hyped up for it. LLA was my fourth choice region, as Spanish is my second language. But I just couldn't hype myself up, and I think that's because this region still continues to be one of the weakest, if not the weakest. And so my petition for an Americas region is still open. Please join it. Right, please. We need an Americas region. Yeah. And then GAM. I didn't watch a lot of them because of all the match fixing in the region, which really hurt me. Like a lot of the top VCS players that I liked watching, like your Yoshinos, your Drakthars, Bean Jays, like they're all gone now, and that really hurt. But like, if this had been pre-COVID, even with all of that, I'd have probably put them like maybe here ahead of Loud. But like, as things stand, I have no reason to put any faith in them. So they're just here. They're technically in the last spot, but like they could show up because I didn't watch anything after the match fixing. I did watch some stuff before the match fixing, but there's nothing you can take from it because it was fairly obviously match fixing. As in, when I say before match fixing, I mean before the investigation and before the cancellation of the league. So yeah, we'll see what happens. If you have any thoughts, tell me, because I don't know everything. I wish I did. See ya.